The Silent Witness, Part 1. A Routine Morning. Victoria, Australia, July 18, 2003. The winter morning was unusually still. Thin mist clung low to the ground, curling around the tall eucalyptus trees that stood like ancient watchers over the bushland outside Melbourne. A chill hung in the air, soft but steady, the kind that slipped under jackets and whispered across the skin. Eric Johnson had lived in the area for over 30 years. A retired park ranger now in his early 60s, he knew the land like most people know the back of their hand. The trails, the sounds, the silence. He wasn't a man of many words, but the forest spoke a language he understood. That Friday he rose early, as always, fed his dog, brewed a strong black tea, and pulled on his worn boots. He was headed toward a small clearing near the Bunyip State Park boundary, a place few others visited, a place he called the Still Spot. He didn't go there to hunt or fish, just to walk, just to breathe. He told his wife, Margaret, he'd be back before noon. He didn't come home. The ground had been wet for days. Weeks of rain had turned sections of the undergrowth into a hidden patchwork of soft earth, moss, and in some spots, treacherous bog. Eric walked slowly that morning, his breath misting in front of him, cane in one hand, a thermos of tea in the other. Birds called faintly above. The stillness was broken only by the occasional creak of a branch or the distant hum of cockatoos. Then he heard something odd. A rustle, low, close. He turned, expecting to see a wallaby darting through the scrub, but instead, just ahead, stood a kangaroo. A female, medium-sized, alert but calm. Her ears twitched, but she didn't bolt. Eric paused. Kangaroos were common out here, but this one didn't seem in a hurry to move on. She stood with her front paws lowered, her gaze fixed directly on him. Then, slowly, she turned and hopped forward into the brush. Eric frowned. He kept walking. He didn't notice the shift in the ground beneath his feet, not until his left boot sank 6 inches into the muck. He tried to step back, but his other foot slipped deeper. The earth gave way. Suddenly, he was in it, thigh deep, sucked down into cold, wet soil that clung like hands. He dropped the thermos, tried to steady himself with the cane, but it sank and vanished instantly. He cursed, looked around. There was nothing nearby to grip, only wet shrubs and reeds that tore at the touch. He exhaled slowly. He knew what this was. Bog, and he knew how fast it could turn. Eric tried to shift his weight, to lean forward and pull a leg free, but the motion only dragged him deeper. Cold mud now lapped at his waist. His heart pounded, but he kept his breathing steady. Panic kills faster than mud, he reminded himself. But minutes passed, then more. No one knew he was out this far. He hadn't brought his mobile. It barely worked in this part of the forest anyway. And then, just as the silence began to stretch too long, a sound. A soft rustle from the brush. He turned his head. The kangaroo, the same one. She stood maybe 20 feet away, partially framed by a low bush. Her body was tense, ears pricked forward, watching him. Eric blinked. Then he did something strange. He spoke aloud. "Go on," he said, voice low. "Nothing you can do." But the kangaroo didn't move. Part 2. Below the surface. Eric Johnson wasn't new to danger. He'd spent years in the bush. He'd seen wildfires, floods, and tourists who wandered too far without a map. He'd been bitten by snakes, pulled leeches from his skin. He'd learned that nature was neither cruel nor kind, just indifferent. But this was different. He wasn't 25 anymore. His hands were numb from cold. His legs, pinned beneath the surface, had stopped aching. They didn't feel like legs anymore, just weight. The mud had reached his ribs. He looked up toward the gray sky. Fog had thickened in the trees. The sun, already weak in winter, was fading behind cloud. He couldn't yell. His voice, like the air around him, felt damp and tired. Even if he screamed, who would hear? He was 2 miles from the nearest road, 5 from the ranger station. Alone. Almost. The kangaroo was still there. She had moved slightly closer, now just 10 feet away, and stood facing him, her body half-turned. She didn't move much, just twitched her ears, watched. Eric let out a slow breath. "You've got nothing for me, girl," he muttered. "Go on, run." But she didn't. Instead, she bounced once, not away, but toward the clearing, stopped, looked back, then bounced again, slow, deliberate, again, and stopped. Eric narrowed his eyes. What in God's name? At the same time, back at home, Margaret Johnson glanced at the wall clock. It was 12:23. Eric should have been back. She stood up, slowly, not out of fear yet, but habit. She knew him. He was never late without calling. She checked the phone. No messages. The dog, a blue heeler named Dusty, sat by the door, whining quietly. Margaret hesitated, then picked up the keys. Meanwhile, Eric's strength was fading. His breath came shallow now. The cold had climbed into his chest. He couldn't feel his legs at all. He knew what hypothermia looked like. He'd taught younger rangers about it. The slow slide from awareness to confusion, from pain to numbness, from shivering to stillness. That's what scared him most, because he was starting to feel still. Then, movement. Fast. Too fast for the forest. A four-wheeler, roaring across the ridgeline. Then voices. "Eric?" His mouth moved, but no sound came. Then, a crack in the brush. Boots. A man in ranger green burst into the clearing, then froze. Dear God. 2 others followed. They ran. One of them dropped to his knees and grabbed Eric's arm. "Hold on, we've got you." Another uncoiled a length of rope and tossed it to the man already ankle-deep. They worked fast, without panic. They knew what they were seeing. One false move and the suction would pull harder. But together, inch by inch, they pulled Eric free. His legs emerged last, shaking, blue, drenched in mud. They laid him flat on a thermal blanket, wrapped him in foil, pressed warm packs to his chest and underarms. One man radioed for medical support. The other sat close, hands on Eric's shoulder. "Don't sleep, mate. Stay with us. You're all right now." Eric blinked slowly. His lips trembled. He whispered, barely audible. "Wasn't alone." The ranger leaned closer. "Say again?" Eric swallowed. Kangaroo wouldn't leave. The ranger turned, looked around, and there, at the edge of the clearing, just behind the brush, stood the animal, still watching. Then, as if satisfied, she turned and with 3 slow hops disappeared into the trees. Part 3, what they couldn't explain. The hospital room was quiet. Muted beeps tracked Eric's heartbeat. An IV line fed warm fluids into his arm. An oxygen mask sat lightly across his face. He looked older now, not just from the ordeal, but from something else. A kind of weight behind the eyes, the kind that only comes after staring at death and blinking first. Margaret sat beside him, fingers laced around his hand. She hadn't left his side since the helicopter brought him in the evening before. The doctors said he'd come within an hour of organ shutdown. His core body temperature had dropped below 32 degrees Celsius. 1 more hour in that bog, and they would have been writing a different report. But he was alive. Barely. The nurses whispered in the hallway about the ranger who got pulled out by a miracle. They didn't know the half of it. 2 days later, Senior Ranger Bill Harlan came to see him. Bill was in his late 40s, ex-military, no nonsense. He had worked with Eric off and on for 15 years. Trusted him. He pulled up a chair. No clipboard, just sat. Eric looked tired, but alert. His voice was hoarse when he spoke. "You saw her?" Bill nodded slowly. "We did." Eric turned his head toward the window. "She wasn't just watching." "No," Bill said, "she wasn't." He rubbed his face, then continued. "When we got the call from Margaret, I was already nearby. I was checking flood conditions east of Labertouche. I figured maybe you'd slipped, or sprained something." Eric chuckled. "Barely. Would have been easier." Bill gave a thin smile. "When I got near the trailhead, I saw something strange. A kangaroo, standing on the access track. Not spooked, just waiting. Every time we moved forward, she hopped a bit, stayed ahead, like she was leading us." Eric nodded, eyes closed now. "I thought maybe I imagined it," Bill said. "But the other boys saw her too. Even after we pulled you out, she stayed nearby. We radioed it in. Nobody could explain it." Eric's voice was little more than a whisper. She knew. Bill leaned forward. "You think she understood?" "I think," Eric said slowly, "that she saw a creature in trouble, and for some reason, she didn't walk away." Word of the incident spread quietly. It didn't make front pages, not right away, but a local station picked it up. Then another. Soon headlines appeared. "Kangaroo helps save retired ranger in Victorian bush. Animal guides rescuers to man trapped in bog. Instinct, empathy, or something else." The story caught people's attention. In an age of cynicism, this was something different. No tragedy, no scandal, just help. Unlikely, unexplained, but help nonetheless. Back at home, after his discharge, Eric took weeks to walk unassisted. He moved slowly, favoring his right leg, and the cold still made his joints ache. But he was back. One crisp morning, he stood on his porch, a thermos in hand. The forest stretched before him, green and silent. Dusty the dog lay beside him, ears twitching at the sounds of birds. And for just a moment, only a second, he thought he saw a shape between the trees, upright, gray, still. A kangaroo. She didn't come closer, just stood there, partially framed in the bush, staring toward the house. Eric raised the thermos slightly, a silent salute. Then, like before, she turned and vanished. Part 4. What remained? Weeks passed, then months. Eric returned to the forest slowly, like revisiting an old friend after a falling out. The first time he walked past the trail where he'd gone under, his pace slowed. The trees were the same. The dampness in the air, the call of magpies overhead. But the ground, it felt different now. Not just dangerous, alive. It was no longer a place he controlled. It was a place that had shown him mercy. One cool morning in late spring, Eric stood once more at the edge of the bog. New grass had begun to grow where the earth had once swallowed him. The area was still soft, but the trail markers nearby had been reinforced. A small wooden sign had been added, nailed carefully to a low post. Johnson Crossing, July 2003. Tourists didn't understand the name. Locals did. It wasn't meant as a memorial. It was a reminder. Eric never called the kangaroo his. He didn't name her, didn't claim her. She wasn't a pet, not a trained animal, not a symbol. She was wild, and in her own way, wise. There was no rational explanation, no scientific study that could say definitively what had happened that day, why she had stayed, why she had waited, why she had led. But Eric didn't need one. He had lived through it, and that was enough. Years later, speaking at a wildlife stewardship event in Ballarat, Eric told the story to a room of volunteers, rangers, and students. He kept it simple. No drama, no exaggeration. When he finished, a young woman raised her hand and asked, "Do you think she knew you were in trouble, or was it just coincidence?" Eric looked down for a moment, then back up. "I think," he said, "we underestimate who else is watching us." The room went quiet. Then he added, "We talk about animals like they're either threats or entertainment, but sometimes they're neither. Sometimes they just decide to act." He would never forget the feeling of sinking. But more importantly, he would never forget what pulled him back. Not a machine, not a miracle, just presence. Unlikely, unexplainable, undeniably real. Final note to the listener. Maybe you believe in instinct, maybe in fate, or maybe you just believe in stories that feel too strange to ignore. This wasn't magic. It wasn't a movie. It was a man, a forest, and something wild that didn't walk away. Let that stay with you. And if this story moved you, don't let it end here. Subscribe for more true, powerful stories from around the world. Click like if it reminded you of something we often forget, that we're not alone out there. Leave a comment. Have you ever experienced something unexplainable in nature? Because the more we tell these stories, the closer we get to understanding who we are and who's still watching.